You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 404, our first part of our Fallen Star breakdown. We've spent now, let's see, it's been about probably 2 months, coming up on 2 months since the Fallen Star first came out. And we always said we would come back to this. We did kind of a spoiler-free review, but we really wanted to allow people to kind of get into the book, finish reading it. Oh, and then we had that Book of Boba Fett show that came out. So that kind of maybe took some center stage for us in terms of what we were covering. But nonetheless, we have got this is just the beginning too. This is the first episode of a number of episodes that are coming up around the High Republic content. A lot of what we saw in Wave 3 as part of Phase 1. So we owe it to you guys, and we've got it all planned out. We're ready to talk about it, and we're pretty pumped about it. And I say we, I'm talking about none other than the dark side man. What does your shirt say? Come to the dark side.
Oh,
we have
beer.
We have beer. Okay. I've heard cookies and pizza and ice cream, but I didn't realize they were into beer as well. But Jonesy's with us tonight.
I got all the things.
Surprise. Jonesy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's like every week lately, it's more of a Empire Strikes Back moment with us with technical problems. Or
it's not my fault.
Like your DAC every week. I've got a malfunction.
I was thinking more like Lando. Like, it's not my fault.
Oh, no, it's like we're in the battle already. And you're like, wait.
No, we can't go.
Got a malfunction of fire control.
Just hang on.
Just hang on, Albert. Hang on.
Yeah, there was technical difficulties once again. Not that you really care, but yeah, we got a little bit of a late start because I can't get this thing to work with a Mac for some reason on Chrome. But that's a whole nother story for another time.
Yeah. Well, that's the joys of live streaming and the things that go with.
Yep. And
by the way, we're live.
Yeah. No do-overs.
Sunday nights. 9 p.m.
Do we have any news to talk about? I didn't even check to see if we had anything.
Yeah, on the Patreon show, we had mentioned Tom Veach is passing away at 80 years old. And so I think we were just going to say it one more time on the main show here, and just a big loss to the community. And it was author and of a lot of the books in the kind of the resurgence of Star Wars, if you will, back in the 90s, and with audio dramas and things like that. So again, Tom Veach will be missed, and a real pillar of the community back in the day when it was still, kind of re-energizing itself. So gonna be sad to not have him around.
Yep. Oh, okay. We've got let's see. We also need to talk about Patreon. We've got some new Patreon folks. We picked up 2 more last week. Do you have those in front of you? Because I don't.
Yeah. And actually, I think they're folks that have come back. So it's always awesome to see people come back. J.R. Eaton and Corey Inglis. So J.R. joined up at the what's it called? The After Dark tier, and then Corey went ahead and jumped in at the Green Milk tier. So appreciate it, folks. We hope you're enjoying the content, and welcome back. I can't remember if they're from. I think they're Patrons before. I know they've been with the show for a long time.
GR he was a staunch follower and supporter, and just an overall good friend over on the basement. In fact, I had him when we did the Ernie Klein interview. I had deputized JR as one of my guys, as the bouncers, if you will, one of the admins during that show. So he knows Will pretty well as well. So thank you, JR, for shifting your money over here. Definitely appreciated.
Yeah, thanks,
and Corey,
guys.
too. Yes, thank you. And all the Patreons, really. Thank you guys so much.
And we did have a 5-star review over on iTunes. Yeah, Albert and Jonesy travel the galaxy of Star Wars stories told in film, novels, comics, and now television streaming shows. They give their thoughts and give listeners a thing to think on. They've been in my playlist for a long spell. If they're in my playlist, recommend to get in yours. So that was from Farm Boy. So appreciate the review. And if you guys want to leave us a review, iTunes is a great place to do it. If you're on the iOS platform,
Spotify as well.
Yeah, Spotify. Anywhere you can leave a review, we appreciate where you leave one. And if there's something we can do to earn that 5 stars, let us know.
Yep, I'm willing to pay money. Hey, I've got, look at this. I got this new mug, and it's Baby Yoda, Grogu, sitting there drinking that coffee, and it says nom, nom, nom. It's for cookies, I think. I don't know. That's what I've been using it for. It's huge. Let me see.
That's adorable, though.
Here's the, I'm holding this now up. Here's the Gonk droid for scale. you can kind of see it's a massive cup that I've got here. But
It makes me so happy that we've made that a thing.
what, the gonk droid for scale?
But yeah, we use the gonk droid, the little toy gonk droid that's like 2 inches tall for scale.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a great cup that I picked up. So, okay. And all right. So let's talk about what we're going to do here. So this is the first of several episodes that we're going to do covering the Fallen Star. We kind of went back and forth about, okay, we took a certain approach when we broke down Light of the Jedi. Then we took a different approach when we kind of broke down the Rising Storm. I think this is probably going to fall somewhere in between those two in terms of how we've got this laid out. But tonight, I think we really want to just focus on, kind of like a spoiler review, talk about the things that we enjoyed, things that fell short, it could have been worked on, kind of give our overall thoughts and impressions, stuff that really, just kind of have an open discussion about the book, full spoilers as well. If you are listening to this and you've not read Fallen Star, again, it sounds cliche, but go read it and then come back and watch this or listen to this. Or if this is your way to know what's going on without reading it, then welcome, because we are going to kind of touch on a lot of the bigger moments and the highlights throughout all of this. And I think in total, we've got about, 4 episodes? I should know since I kind of laid all that out, but
I think we've got closer to like 5 or 6.
Okay, yeah, it's quite a bit. But we've broken it down.
Mix though, yeah, a mix of general show and Patreon, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to start with this one as kind of a general overview discussion, and then we're going to shift all of the breakdown episodes into the Patreon. So if you're a Patreon member, you're going to get stuff like a show dedicated to Mark-Ian Rowe in the Fallen Star, which will probably have some Nihil crossover, that sort of thing. We'll get into the vessel, the crew of the vessel. We'll get into Bell and Buryaga, of course, Stellan and Elzar, etc. So we've got shows dedicated just to those elements of the book. So should be fun, should be exciting. And then on top of that, we're going to, with the main shows, just as a bit of news, I guess, or kind of to go back to what I mentioned in the opening there, we are going to get into a lot of the stuff that we haven't had a chance to cover around the High Republic, and specifically things like the Eye of the Storm comic. We've got, I think by the time we do that episode, the second issue will be out, which will be good. We timed that perfectly. Right. We've got Trail of Shadows that we need to talk about. My goodness, there's so much been going on there. And then Midnight Horizon, which is just an amazing book. I mean, it's
a great book.
Yeah. And I don't want to give too much away here, but if you've not had a chance to read Midnight Horizon, or you didn't have it on your radar as one of the books that you felt like you needed to read, go read it. Like, change your mind. I mean, hopefully we'll change your mind, if not before then, but it is an amazing book by Daniel Jose Older. One of the best of the High Republic, honestly, in my opinion.
Well, and then we probably need to go and touch on issue 15 of the High Republic comic, the main comic. When it comes out, it's going to have the full picture of the Leveler. So the first appearance visually of the Leveler, not all of the, presumably not all of the interpretations we've had it through the Jedi of their weird psychedelic nightmare, trippy kind of thing. But we will see what this thing actually looks like. So that would be interesting to go visit. And actually, I know not everybody gets into the comics, but the comics lately, the last few issues of the High Republic main comic series have been really, really, really good. And so it might be worth just kind of a general overview of the High Republic comic, at least maybe these last few that have run right up to the Fallen Star, because I think there's some really interesting character moments in there, especially for Avar Kriss and Keeve, and really in Skier too. I mean, Skier's kind of fallen off the radar for a lot of people, but Avar and Keeve have had a lot of stuff going on, and Lorna D is there as well. So they've just continued on in a different medium. So it might be good to kind of revisit some of that in some way too. So we might have to throw that in there once that series wraps up, which should be here in March.
Yeah, no, I've got that down as episode 406. It's called Jedi's End, and that's the name of the last arc of this first volume. So it's like the last 6 issues that have come out leading up until the one that you mentioned there, but definitely want to get in and kind of talk about all that. So, and I think it's good because, as we're going to discuss now, there's no Avar Kriss in this. And I mean, very little. Yeah. And it's kind of, you're kind of left wondering like, well, she shows up in the book, but then you don't really know what happened. And we'll get into that here in a little bit, but it's because it's picked up in the comic. So I think it'll do well for you if you've not been following this along and you kind of want to know where she's at.
I know, and it means so much if you read the comic because it puts such a different spin.
Yes.
On what you get in the book. Yeah, we'll talk about it, but yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about it. We're done talking about it. Let's talk about it. Okay, so let's start with the I don't know. I guess give me your overall thoughts. I mean, this book it is the final adult novel, or I guess adult novel of the first phase. And, you know, going in, you and I both, I know you love Claudia Gray. I love Claudia Gray. I was super excited that she was coming down to do this. And I know this sounds like I'm leading up to a but, and there's really not a but. I would say this was a very, very good book. In my review, I try to convey a sense of, this is a book you absolutely have to read. And I stand by that. You have to go read this if you're a High Republic fan. There's just no mistake about it. And not just for the sake of the content, but because it is a well-written book. I do have issues with some of the choices that were made, and I think they're probably more personal than me. It's not going to be a negative review or a negative kind of episode by any means, but there are some things that I felt like would have been different or should have been different for me personally. But going into this, right, we had probably the most seasoned veteran of Star Wars coming in, writing this final book. And it really felt like we were leading up to this really huge, monumental kind of thing. And that's where I kind of it felt short, because I felt like it was very compartmentalized. It was very small in terms of scale. But let's talk about your expectations going into the book, and then kind of your initial thoughts as you were reading this and trying to ignore my text messages with all the spoilers that I was sending.
Well, in my defense, I actually read this one pretty quickly compared to most of them. But expectations going into this were, I was curious how they were going to follow through with this, because we're talking about destroying Starlight Beacon, right? I mean, that's really where the climax of the story for like what's actually happening is the destruction of this beacon of hope. And so we were really curious about how they were going to do this thing. Was it going to be an attack? Was it going to be something else? And the way that she went about it, of being it more of an inside out type of destruction, was very interesting. And it made for a very different way of storytelling when you've got, you and I had talked about this, like usually when you have Star Wars stories, you have 3 going on at the same time, right? We've seen this all throughout Star Wars. No matter which one you've done, there's always been multiple things going on at the same time. And the books kind of follow that same formula a bit. And this one did as well, but they were on the same station. So it's all kind of within the same building, but in different places. And what was interesting is I read some articles about why they decided to break the station in 2. And the breaking of the station in 2 was a compromise, or was a solution for Cavan Scott and Claudia Gray, because they knew the content was overlapping with Cavan Scott doing the comics and Claudia Gray writing this book. And so the reason why they split the station in 2 was so that they could, because you notice most of the story is happening with Elzar Mann and Stellan Geos. And so there's other things going on where the Ataraxia is attached and all of that. So it was interesting that they kind of split that story a little bit, and it leaned a little more heavily, which you could argue was a more interesting aspect anyway, with Elzar and Stellan and trying to actually figure out what to do about Starlight, and with the levelers running loose and stuff. But expectations were always really high going in, because Rising Storm was so good and had so much action. Start to finish was just a fantastic book. And we, some folks, Claudia Gray has a slow burn to get started sometimes. And you and I kind of differed on this one. You kind of felt like she stayed a bit true to form, if I recall. Whereas I felt like this one was actually pretty well paced through the entire thing. It never really got to a fevered pitch, I think, but it always felt like it was moving and going. And I was never bored with it at all. And I think some of the shocking moments in this, especially with Elzar, I mean, man, there's right on par with what Cavan Scott laid at our feet, and now Claudia Gray's taken his cues. So we don't know who to trust anymore with this thing.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you mean to do that? I didn't.
That was different.
Sorry, I just threw something in chat that says Zoe. So anybody that is looking at chat, I don't know why that happened. So I did feel like this one did get off to a slow start. It's a slow burn, like you said, I think, for Claudia Gray, for me, for the most part, in every one of the books. I think where this one differed, though, was I didn't feel bored. I don't know if bored wasn't probably the word I would use. I would say it was just.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't saying.
Yeah. But I get what you're saying, though. It wasn't action packed like the Rising Storm. I felt like the Rising Storm, it didn't give you a chance to breathe, and this one was like slowly suffocating you, right? In terms of like the pacing, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but it was just like the tension, the buildup was kind of very slow and methodic.
Kind of like Bloodlines in that.
That's a good example.
Bloodlines in that way. Yeah, it really felt like how that one was a really slow burn.
There was a lot of setup, and then we get to the very end. There's a lot going on, and it's very busy, and the pacing's very different at that point. But so why don't we do this? I want to talk about the things that the stuff that I thought really worked well, the things that I really enjoyed from the novel, and I'm going to start first and foremost with Stellan Gios. Just that character alone, like it was a character we didn't really get much of. We had him in, of course, the Rising Storm. He was absent in the Falling Star, absent in Light of the Jedi, absent in just about everything. I think he made an appearance in one of the comics, a couple of the comics here and there, but we didn't really get to know him until the Rising Storm. And to see him go from where he was there to where he goes at the very end of this book, I think is a very interesting character development for him. It is, I feel like it sucks that he had to die of all the people. And I think going into this, there was a lot of speculation. I mean, man, they threw up that poster about, who's going to live or who's going to die. I forget however they posed that question, but he was not one that I was expecting. I was expecting something like, an Avar Chris turning to the dark side, which we'll talk about the comic here. I was expecting something like that. I didn't think felt like it was probably going to be too early before they got rid of Stellan Gios, or one of the three firebrands, Stellan, Avar, or Elzar. But in the end, I think it was a satisfying death, if that can be a thing. I enjoyed his journey. I connected with him at the very end, and I think that's what Claudia Gray does really well in this. Like, all of my notes, when I go looking at my notes here, I was like writing everything that I didn't like about it, and there's nothing in here that says, with the exception of one, none of the stuff I didn't like are characters. Everything that I loved about this book were all characters and the things that the characters went through, right? If that makes any sense. So to her credit, I think she does a really good job with it. And for Stellan Gios, and just reconnect, like being able to connect with him at the very end and kind of sympathize with what he's going through, about how, he was he was a person that really never made any decisions of his own. Like he was always being led by someone else. He was the poster boy, right? He was the star. I mean, we can talk. The other thing, I'll just kind of tie it into this, was the title of the book, right? We talked about the fallen star and whether that was going to be somebody falling from grace in terms of going from the good side to the dark side. Was it Starlight Beacon? Was it both? And I think at the end, it was Starlight Beacon first and foremost. But you also had the fallen star. I mean, Stellan Gios, his name means stellar, or what do you call it? A star, essentially.
He was the pole star.
He was the pole star, right? The brightest star in a constellation. And so you had that kind of meaning. But then you also had him in the Rising Storm, where he was the star, literally, of the High Republic, or of the Jedi Order during this time, right? He was on all the vids, and people saw him holding Lena So. He was now a celebrity. So from that perspective, he was another kind of star that had fallen. But yeah, I mean, just him finally making a decision on his own and doing so like without the aid of the Force, right? This was stripping down somebody to his core, removing him of the Force, and allowing him to kind of save the day and go out the way he wanted to go out. I thought it was just a very, very fulfilling, and although sad, I actually really enjoyed the way he kind of passed. So,
yeah, it was. I don't know if I would use the word satisfying for me, because I don't know. I really wanted more with Stellan. I thought there was a lot more to develop. It's really difficult when you have a character who had such lofty expectations and everything, and then you spend really the entirety of this book, he is being influenced by the Leveler's presence. And he's struggling with fatigue. He looks haggard all the time. And, for him to go through this journey to where he's at, to where he's like, I'm just doing this as a man, not as a Jedi, not as a Force user, but just as a man. I'm finally feeling like myself, something I should have done long ago. Very tropish, right? Of if you find yourself right at the very end and you kind of die with peace and purpose, which I think is generally one of the themes of this book, was kind of place and purpose, right? But I'm never quite satisfied when we get this good arc for a character and they finally get to something only for them to go away. And I think that's really difficult. Now, having said that, we haven't experienced Force ghosts yet, or Force spirits, however you want to say it, in High Republic. So it would be interesting if at some point we actually had Force spirits come back and present themselves in High Republic, which we've not had. We've only had them in everything else.
Yeah.
Original trilogy, prequels, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a way for him
But
to bring him back. I don't know how they would contend with the whole Yoda not knowing and having to be taught and all that, but I'm sure there's probably ways around that. Here's an
right.
unfair.
And
Oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, and I'm with you though with the parts that I had more critiques on weren't really the characters themselves. I
Mhm.
mean, it was really because you can go through the characters, you look at what they did and their motivations and what they had. I think there was only one character I really didn't care for. I was Coley Lynn. I just kind of felt like he was just kind of tossed in there a little bit. Um, but I think it's the story choices, I guess, were probably the only things you really had a complaint about. But again, I think it wasn't even like the choices they made or how they were done. It was just there were certain things I was hoping to get resolution on that I just still don't have resolution. Now I'm worried I'm never going to get that resolution with Stellan and Orla, right?
Yeah.
Like the way seekers. And I mean, those are types of themes that they really played up. And she did such a great job of pulling you in to say, okay, Stellan and Orla have a backstory, right? Just like Vitus Comac and Orla have a backstory. And now it's like we don't know if we're ever going to get them. And we also start to get a flavor of Stellan's perspective on way seekers and why he has a problem with
Mhm.
it. And maybe there was some resolution with that here, and kind of where we got. If you just kind of pull it out of the story a little bit, and you say, okay, well, him having to find his own path, even though it was in this kind of moment, maybe he understood way seekers a little bit better, that they had to go on this kind of other journey of where the Force takes them. But it was really not ever put in overt terms like that, where it was really satisfying. And we had so many almost moments. I mean, I say so many. It was like 2 or 3 almost moments between Stellan and even Elzar with Orla of understanding what this rub is and why, while they're really good friends, why is there this tension between them all the time? And it's not necessarily relationship-y type
Right.
of
Yeah, yeah.
tension. It's really a matter of belief system and how they perceive your place in the order and what you should or should not do and how you go about doing it. Is very much I can't think of the right word I'm looking for, but just how you go about your life as a Jedi, and that difference of opinion between Stellan and Orla.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about Stellan Geos kind of being the prototype of somebody like Kenobi, kind of by the book. Definitely much more. He seems much more like in tune with the Force, but from the overall kind of approach of, hey, this is for everybody more than myself. And the way seekers, I wouldn't say they feel. They're not selfish, but they're not playing as part of this game. They're thinking about they report directly to the Force and not to some kind of council in some way, right? I mean, that's where it is. It's kind of a different opinion of views there, and who leads who kind of thing. I want to go back to something you said earlier, though. You said that the death was something surprising, and you wanted more. Here's an unfair question. But if you had to say which of these had Clone Wars notwithstanding and all that, but if you had to say which of these characters, did you feel like had a fitting death, if you will, was it somebody like Stellan Geos or was it somebody like Qui-Gon Jinn? Because Qui-Gon Jinn was robbed from us out of the gate. I mean, everybody loved that character at the very beginning. He was just kind of before the High Republic, he was what we kind of thought the Jedi Order to be, and not these other jokers that were in that movie. But same thing. I mean, we lost him at the very end of course, the Phantom Menace. But which one do you think had the better fitting death, or is that even a fair question? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really tough one because Qui-Gon died in battle, I guess, with an unexpected, what's the word, villain or unexpected battle, and what was going on was just the veil was pulled over their eyes so much. So at least I think that one was more expected as far as it's more streamlined and a more direct way of conflict to where these things can happen when they die. Whereas I think with Stellan Geos, it was one of those things where there was still a choice to be made about whether or not he sacrificed himself in order to protect an extra dozen people. And that's really kind of what it came to, is that he was protecting an extra dozen people because they had avoided the hundreds or thousands or millions or whatever it was with the city down below on Irem. And so it was a bit of a, it was, I understand where the Jedi are at. One life lost is too many. But also at some point, it's also can you still do more good? And that's an existential question, right? It's a very personal question about what do you go about it when you're talking about saving yourself. Is it worth it to put anybody, sacrifice anybody in that way, just so you can, protect yourself, or so you can live another day and try to do more good later on?
Right.
And that's a very difficult and very personal question for folks. And I think with the Jedi, I think with Stellan and Geos in particular, I think that's a lot of guilt that you might bring with you. And we see this from some of the Jedi we have. So I still think it's Stellan over Qui-Gon. I think with Qui-Gon, while it was sad, it was also, we had to have a way of Anakin and Obi-Wan having an imperfect relationship in order to identify with where Anakin was going to go later on. Whereas with Stellan, you could argue that Elzar needed Stellan a bit still, but from this moment on, I mean, Elzar is an adult, and they've known each other all, and they're not really learning a whole lot from one another, although they do help one another off and on.
Yeah, you said something in there also that kind of sparked my memory. The idea of whether is 12 lives worth your own, and kind of as a quick aside, there's a documentary out right now about that Thai soccer team back in 2018 that went into that cave and they were trapped. There's a great documentary about this, and I just happened to watch it today. And there's a moment in there where they were talking about, okay, they were starting to have to face the realization that they may only be able to successfully rescue one child, and all the other 11 may just die. And the guy that was from the U.S. that was kind of running the mission, if you will, said at the very end, all these choices are horrible, but some choices are better than others. And if we can just save one life, then for him, that was mission accomplished. And he was trying to get through to everybody to make them understand that those were kind of the terms. And, but it's the same kind of thing here. Where Stellan, yes, he had protected millions of lives by not letting that thing crash, excuse me, on the main city there on Irem. But, and just spending just a little bit more time and drifting that thing out further. At most, he was going to have casualties from like drowning or whatever, but he was trying to minimize the number of lives. And that is in tune with what the Jedi were trying to do this time. We talked about that every time they killed a Nihil. They felt horrible. They felt remorse for them, or they would do everything they could not to hurt them or kill them. And, sometimes maybe that's a lesson that's going to be learned. Maybe it's a lesson that gets played out here a little bit later, but okay, so I wanted to so bring that back to Star Wars and bring it back to Stellan Geos. The other aspect of him that I really enjoyed, that I felt like, I guess we got enough of, but I've always liked how the different Jedi are able to kind of see the Force, and with Stellan Geos being able to see it as a vast sky of stars and all that. Right. That one's probably the most fitting, I think, of any of the other characters. Although I've liked all the other analogies of water and fire and that sort of thing, but. I did enjoy that. I did that aspect of it. And I just wish we would have seen more of that. I mean, it was there. I think we had little callbacks to the constellations and the pole star, right? Those were, and then of course his name, but I do hope they spend more time on the Jedi and we get to hear more of that. Now there's some Jedi we're not going to ever know because, they're dead now. Maybe don't think we'll ever see those again, but
there's a bit of a list. In this
there
one.
is.
There's a lot of unknowns too. There's some characters we don't know if they survived or not.
Yeah,
and it's more than just Bur Yaga. What I didn't realize, I hadn't seen or read I Republic Adventures issue 13 yet, because that just came out, and Buckets of Blood went back into Starlight Beacon before it was wrecked. So now I don't know if Buckets of Blood survived.
I'm pretty sure he's alive.
I'm pretty sure but
right.
I'm just saying, now there's question marks over more than just Bur Yaga, fighting the Wrath Tars, and whether or not he survived, but there's also Buckets of Blood, and there's some others that we might find later that were on Starlight that had kind of an unceremonious death.
Let's see. Let me move on with the stuff that I really enjoyed. Elzar Mann, beginning to end, I thought, again, he's so relatable in so many ways. And I don't mean like, I'm not a playboy or anything, but he is somebody that makes mistakes and he feeds off emotion. And I do subscribe that he is somewhat of a template for Anakin Skywalker, that he does have a lot of the same tendencies. He kind of leads with his heart, and he is very emotional and, makes some horrible mistakes. Sometimes he cuts people in half. That's okay.
Oh my gosh.
We have to learn.
I'm still traumatized.
We have to learn from these things, Jonesy. That was like shocking to me that that happened.
I was I was literally jaw dropped, couldn't believe this happened.
And not only was it just like, oh, he killed somebody, it was like Chancey Yarrow of all people, right? Somebody that we had known from the other novels being sliced. And I thought it was, I had to go back and reread it because I had made this little, like meme where it showed, I forget how it was now, but I had Chancey Yarrow cut. No, I cut her in half and then I put this Darth Maul spider legs on her. And I'd posted that somewhere and they were like, no, dude, they cut her like vertically. And I'm like, oh, wait, did I misread that? Yeah.
Like wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah. So I went back and read it. I was like, whoa, that's pretty vicious that he just went all,
Well, he was so angry too. I mean, and again, he was under the influence of the levelers being present. He wasn't thinking clearly. Was the fear and the anger and everything just going around them was just too much in that moment. He had finally started opening himself back up to the Force too. And it all just kind of came rushing in at once. And it was devastating. I mean, it was really devastating because you see a character who throughout this book was really finding his way. And while he was nervous to tap back into the Force, had largely been closing himself off to it, which ended up being a good thing because he wasn't as affected by the levelers throughout most of the story. But for him to go through all of that only to leap to an assumption over what he sees, assuming that Yancey and Nan were the saboteurs the entire time, didn't ask any questions, didn't take any prisoners. It was just lights out. It's done. And it's just so tragic. It's just so tragic. It was just, I mean, it really broke my heart. I'm like, I just couldn't believe Claudia Gray of all people would do this to me. Kevin Scott, we kind of expected at this point.
Sure.
But not Claudia.
Not innocent Claudia Gray. I had to read that several times because I think, wait, what? He cut her in half? Like, I couldn't believe it, honestly. It was just one of those, it was a very shocking moment. So I really enjoyed that because I think
And I'm with you that it was Yancey Starro or Yancey Yarrow. Chancey Yarrow that was the one that he killed. It was just unbelievable because a fairly significant character at this point. I mean, she's the mother to Sylvester Yarrow, who has been in some of the other books as well.
Yep.
And so there's going to be knock-on ramifications there as well.
I mean, she wasn't a great person, but she was a person that we knew well. And there, like you said, that connection to her daughter as well.
Right.
Let's see and then, so let's talk about just quickly, Avar, so go back to Elzar Mann. I am really interested to see now what becomes of his relationship with Avar Kriss. They obviously meet up at the very end. There's almost like a level of codependency here between, at least on his end. It feels like he is kind of codependent on people. He needs those relationships and he needs that kind of constant contact and constant reaffirmation of where he is in that relationship. Again, maybe more Anakin stuff there, but I'm very curious to see how this is go, especially given what we know about Avar Kriss and what she's done, right? Neither one of them are clean. Right. Both of them have done some kind of horrible things now. And I don't know. I just don't know where that relationship's going to go. If they're going to truly ship and what that's going to do to them now that they are older and they've got this baggage, they've maybe arguably have walked down the dark side path and we don't know what kind of atonement they're going to go through or cleansing process, if any. But I mean, that could be a relationship that leads to bad things, in my opinion.
It could. I mean, and the major difference is that Avar was lucky to have Key to interfere,
or it would have been worse.
To where it stopped her from doing what Elzar did. But she pulled the trigger basically, right? And she went through the actions of about to kill Lorna D, if only for Keith Trennis interfering.
But she cut her arm off too, didn't she? Her hand.
She cut her hand off, but that's all right. I mean, she was just disarming. She was wielding a lightsaber. It was fine.
Yeah, no, you're right.
We needed to dismemberment. We've been low on the dismemberment.
We finally got in the comics, though.
Right. And so I think there's a difference there. But I think the thing that I like though is that Elzar is yearning to tell her. He doesn't want to hide this. He wants to be open with her because he knows that if he's not, he can't work on it. And he can't trust himself at this point. So you're right. He kind of needs supervision at this point. And Orla was the one to do this for him. And he started relying a lot on Orla and trusting her advice to be able to trust himself. And now he's just this complete mess, right? And there's still a lot of good in Elzar Mann. He wants to do good. Yeah. He continues to try to choose the right path. But you're right. I mean, it's hard not to parallel him with Anakin at some point and say, okay, well, there's wanting to do the right thing and choosing to not do the right thing every once in a while don't jive at some point, and you end up just making that path, and you cross that line. and it's hard to go back, at least without losing a duel to your son, I guess. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's a but with Avar though, how is she going to receive that news, and how are they going to go forward? Because it seems like she was reaching out to Elzar almost as much as he was reaching out to her. I think that's kind of how I interpret it. She reached out her hand at the very end when they're trying to fix the desalinization
Yeah.
plant. Try to say that word 3 times fast. But she reaches out her hand for him, and he takes it. She rests her head on his shoulder. So you're right. There was a certain level of codependency going on where they needed that comfort of one another in that moment. Now, they've been here before,
Mm-hmm.
and Avar was the one who turned her back on
Yeah,
that.
she pushed it away.
And she's the responsible one, right? She
Mhm.
always has been. She's always been the clear thinker. And so is that going to happen again, where at some point we pick this up and Elzar is off the rails again because Avar's like, no, I know what I did. I know what I said, but sorry, I was weak in that moment. It was very emotional. It was a very impactful day. But
I wonder what their child's going to be like when we get to phase 3.
oh
I'm
boy,
kidding. Maybe. Okay, here. Sorry, seriously. Let's go back to.
maybe he'll be the first Skywalker
There you go. Here's
named after Stellan.
let's talk about. Okay, so I got a couple other things here. Let's talk about Marky and Roe. I did like, even though Marky and Roe felt like he was a little, I would say pushed to the back. I mean, he was obviously pulling the strings, and this was his plan. I enjoyed his plan. Okay, I actually enjoyed the thought that went into this about him, causing these skirmishes to happen. I mean, he was sending his troops off to be fodder, in my opinion. I don't think they ever really clearly stated this, but it sounded like, yeah, he was going to replace all of his crew with these enforcer droids at the very end that we, now we've got to contend with. But rather than just killing them off, I mean, he sent them to their death, much like he did with, what's his name? What's the guy in the first book that he just let die out there?
Kazav?
What's that?
Kazav.
Kazav, yeah. Same thing like Kazav, right? I mean, that was kind of the start of it, where he was sending his troops off to just kind of die, and they were basically fodder. They were a means to an end, and causing all those skirmishes and causing people to suddenly leave Starlight Beacon, the refugees coming into Starlight Beacon, that whole part of the refugees coming in and ships going in and out. They touch on it very quickly, where Maru Estella is like asking, hey, what do we have a manifest going on here? Essentially is what he's asking. And Stellan's like, yeah, how do we know who's coming and going? Well, that's what allowed the 3 Nihil to sneak on board of this space station, right? And all the chaos that was going on. So, I mean, all of that worked really well. And it provided him the means for the communication to go out there, right? He was targeting planets that had really good communication systems so they could ping Starlight Beacon and say, we need help. But they were so far away that if they dispatched anybody, it would take forever. Or the timing would work out really in his favor for Starlight Beacon to go kind of be down and be out when there wasn't a good presence or a security presence, because they were just, literally spread too thin, trying to do too many things at once. Right. So I love that. I love the false sense of security that he kind of lulled them into. And as much as it bothers me in real life, I did like the aspects of like 9/11, right? The whole, these 3 characters, what were their names? I wrote them down here because I don't even remember from the books.
They were
Kale,
Guerrera, Lael, and Kale.
Yeah. That those Nihil were kind of like, I mean, I saw them as, the terrorists from 9/11 that were just zealots. And their mission was that they were freely accepting the fact that they were going out there to kill themselves, to blow up Starlight Beacon for the better, for nothing else other than Marchion Row, like serving the eye, right? As crazy as that sounds. Right. But that aspect of them going in and kind of sabotaging Starlight Beacon was really great. And just kind of the parallels with like Titanic. And I want to come back to that in just a little bit, but I do want to kind of tease whether or not giving us Starlight Beacon falling and kind of just pulling the Band-Aid off on that before the book launched worked or didn't work for you. But knowing it was going to fall, it did feel like I was kind of coming into this like, yeah, as Titanic, like, okay, I know there's going to be a, we know how it's going to end. And what I loved, and not to bring the movie into it, but if you've listened to this show or even The Basement, Titanic is the one movie that I've seen the most out of any other movie ever in cinema. It's not Star Wars. It's not anything else. And there's a whole story, which I won't get into because it's embarrassing, but nonetheless,
All the more reason to share.
nonetheless,
Next on Patreon.
I really do love that movie, but
I know you.
But what
do.
I really like
Scary.
about the movie, though, too, is it's just the buildup, right? How it builds up and the tension that it builds, and just one thing after another continues to go wrong, and just painting that tragic picture of how it finally, breaks in half and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. I kind of felt like we got some of that here, but it did fall short for me on that part. And I'll come back to what stuff that didn't work. The tension was definitely there. I love the fact that they showed us this was going to happen, but maybe because I'd seen Titanic so many times, my expectations were way too high going into this book. And I was expecting that level of just on the edge of your seat by the very end, and all these things kind of coming together. But anyways, where was I in that? I don't even know where I went. I went off on Titanic again. I can't remember. But go on. What was so why don't you talk now? Why don't you talk about
Well, you were talking about Marchion Rowe.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Right. Yeah. And Marchion Rowe, I really liked how they portrayed him. You really finally got the ruthlessness, and that he will just do whatever he kind of pleases. And he will use whoever suits his fancy. I mean, quite literally, right? With Eurostaros and their relationship, I guess you can call it. And really we don't really talk about this kind of stuff, but that sexual tension that he put out there, that kind of that bravado that he put towards Staros. And they really painted her, while they scented her, really painted her almost as a, infatuated schoolgirl of sorts. Just like that he was the bad guy of the school.
The bad boy.
Right, yeah. And then she wanted to be on the arm of the bad guy until everything got too real. And so it was a bit tropish in that kind of way. But there's knock-on effects of what Eurostaros is going to come in with her daughter, with Avon, right? And we're reading Mission Disaster right now, so I'm kind of curious how this is all going to fit together. But I liked how they did Marchion Rowe. I liked that he finally came out of the shadows, so to speak, and announced that he is the Eye. I know there's some things you just can't stop yourself. But he finally came out as the Eye. He finally says, "This has all been my design. I can do whatever I want. Like the Nihil can do whatever we want, whenever we want, and you can't stop us." And then he finally stopped saying we. And he's like, "This galaxy is mine." And I think that was a really bold statement, for him to finally come out and accept it. Like all these other players had played their part. And now it was time for him to emerge as the really clear figurehead as everyone else. I mean, Lorna D is in captivity at this point, we believe. And she's not dead. We know she's not dead, but yeah, so she's in captivity, we think.
Yeah.
And, now the one part that wasn't consistent with me though was the Enforcer droids. So the Enforcer droids are black market item. You're not be able to get them. Staros is actually the one that helped facilitate that. And then of course, then she's taken it back. They kind of remind me of like the Yuuzhan Vong droids, right? The YVH droids back in the EU. Very faceless type of things, but very lethal.
Yeah.
But he wants to replace all of his, so the Gaze Electric right now, there's only 3 living things on the ship, I think. Maybe the Leveler's there, I don't know. But it was really Marchion, Staros, and then Thea Fair, his personal assistant. And he has decided that the entire Nihil need to be droids. But at the end, he throws this gigantic party, right? There's still a bunch of Nihil left, we come to find out. And where they're all coming from or how where they're situated is unclear. But it's still very clear that Marchion Rowe still have a plan for all of the bantha fodder that he's just going to throw until he really unleashes the total hell that he intends to for the Jedi. But there's really what's interesting about him is there's nothing he wants, and that's the whole point. He's like, I just do whatever I want. You guys invaded in my space. I don't like you anyway. We still don't really have the whole story about why he doesn't like the Jedi.
Soon,
though. Soon, yeah. We're hoping, hopefully Eye of the Storm issue 2 will give us that clarity we so want and I think so need at this point too, especially since we're not going to come back to this for a while. But yeah, I think the way they wrote Marchion Rowe is actually quite good. And I enjoyed that we finally got the ruthlessness side of him, which I think was very much a continuation of what we saw in Rising Storm. So I thought that was very consistent with where Kevin Scott had built him up to be.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought up the very ending, because that was especially the way it read. Maybe you can, if you remember how the audiobook went, but that transformational, there was a transformational moment for Marky and Rowe at the very end, in that when he was talking about, I'm the eye of the storm, and him basically that declaration of, this is my galaxy. And I mean, because he's got all the cards. I mean, you think about it, he is in a position of power more than he was ever before. Now that he's got Starlight Beacon down, he's got everybody's attention. He's got the leveler. I think the jury's still out on whether or not he's got the laser suppression system that was being exchanged in the black market. I can't remember where that ended up at. I don't think he has it yet. Because I think
it was very much
what's his name? That little mousy guy he finds out that he was trying to sell that on the black market, right? That guy's got it. Professor, or whatever his name is. Doctor.
Oh gosh.
Zhivago. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, so yeah, I do like the kind of where he is in his position of power. And I would agree that he's not done yet. I mean, he's gonna need people to fight his war still, even with the levelers, and the Jedi out of the picture. You don't win a war through words, right? It's all boots on the ground kind of thing. So where is his army? What is he going to use to kind of take over? And where is he going? Like that's like he has all these Outer Rim type skirmishes going on. And when you get into like Midnight Horizon and they're talking about, I guess I shouldn't spoil. Well, it's not a spoiler, but in Midnight Horizon, the thought of the Nihil coming into the core systems is just ludicrous, right? Like it's not even fathomable. There's no way they would ever come here and we would be on top of it and that sort of thing. But I do wonder if his sights are set on someplace like Corellia or, Coronet City now, which is kind of a prominent city that we've got in New Republic, or, Coruscant, right? I mean, any one of these core planets that are massive. I wonder what his plan is going to be, and is he going to take a stab at those guys a little bit later down the road? So,
yeah, I mean, it's clearly he can get his foot in the door anywhere he wants. They've not had any issue with him showing up or with having the Nihil infiltrate and do something in any one of these places, because they've done it, and they've done it reasonably successfully.
Yep. Let's see. So we talked about Marky and Rowe.
So while we're talking about Marky and Rowe, maybe he makes a comment that he was really sad. The only thing that really saddened him this day was the loss of the levelers. Or the beasts that gave their lives to make all this happen. But his response to that was, but that's okay. I can get more. Which is very interesting, because when they first introduced this, this creature, it seemed like it was very special.
Right. One of a kind, frozen.
Kind of one of a kind. Yeah. Very, very worship-like. It was an amazing thing that just couldn't be replicated. And now we've got multiple running around. And where the heck is he getting these things from?
Did I share my theory on that on the Patreon episode, or on this?
I think you might have, but maybe recount it just briefly here for us.
So my theory was that what is his name? The doctor.
I'll find it while you're talking.
Please look that up. So my theory, and I will keep this very brief because there's a lot to it, and I don't remember where the show is, but my theory is that he got that one out of the ice. And he got this little doctor guy to go clone more of those. And if you think about it, if he is breeding them, let's say maybe he's not cloning them. Maybe they're asexual and they can breed on their own, whatever the case may be. He's got more of these things and he's got to bring them up, right? He's got to raise them. He has to feed them. And my theory was that he had taken Loden Greatstorm, had locked up Loden Greatstorm. And because we know from this book, especially in other books, and the comics, they feed off the Force. And I'm taking that as part of this theory. I take that in a literal sense, that he needed to be able to feed these things and grow them so that he could use them when we got to the Rising Storm. And that whole year of, Loden being locked up and suffering and all that. I mean, the levelers to me were probably around there and just feeding off the Force, growing in size, growing in power. And it's probably why, because we never got the explanation as to why he needed a Jedi. You remember that in Light of the Jedi? He was like, hey, we need to find one. We captured one. To me, I think that's what he was using to feed these babies and continue to grow them.
Dr. Utterson.
Thank you. What a little weasel that guy is.
I think some of it with Loden was also to test the effects of the beast, to see if the creature was that effective.
Yeah. Right? But so to that end, I think, I mean, and we've talked about this too, like just the thought of a breed, like an army of these things. I mean, the Jedi are done, right? I don't understand. Well, I got theories of how they can combat the leveler. Everything from using what Luke used and using what Elzar Mann used and suppressing the Force within yourself. I think those are probably maybe where they would go with this, and as a tactic, maybe not a long, sustainable tactic, but in short bouts and spurts, being able to use that to kind of combat them. To using basic people, normal people that aren't affected by the Force, they would be the most effective, right? Do they bring in like some kind of commando army or whatever from the New Republic? That would be really cool if we got a whole branch of that somewhere at some point. And then I started thinking, and then just now that I'm on this topic, another way is the whole thing that's going on with Skier. You have somebody who's been trained as a Jedi, an amazing Jedi, combat wise, very smart, very skilled. He's got, some
physically imposing.
He has the ability to regenerate and regrow. He's got all these things going for him. What he doesn't have is the Force. He's losing the Force. So to spoil the comics a little bit, because I think we will get into this at some point here. Skier has got some kind of physical disability that happens to Trandoshans. Like over time, something happens in their brain, and somehow this is like cutting off his ability to use the Force. And so he's basically
they revert to more of their primal
that's what
instinct.
It is.
So he's becoming more feral without being able to control it, which reduces his ability to tap into the Force consistently.
Yeah. But if you think about it, it sounds like a very tragic story, but who better to lead, right? Maybe the humans the non-Jedi, who better to lead like non-Jedi than somebody like Skier, who's got all these things going for him, like we said. So I think that's going to play in his favor at some point. But they do need to come up with a strategy. I mean, there is no doubt about it at this point. They are scared, which is what I loved most about this book, is we finally got that whole intro, right? That whole beginning to the Project Luminous, right? That last line, now the guardians of peace and justice must face a threat to themselves, the galaxy, and the Force itself. And I think we're finally getting to see where the threat of the Force is, and it's in the way of these levelers and being able to negate the Force. And what do you do, right? They've got to come up with a plan here very soon. So,
right, and the levelers have now impacted so many people who are still living that they're having a better idea of what the creature is, because we've got Emmerich Kaftar in the what's it called, Trail of Shadows comic. He's been affected by it. We've had Elzar, we have Bell. There's others that have experienced this stuff. Indira Stokes, who's still alive, but she was kind of incapacitated in most of this book.
Mm-hmm.
So there's characters now. They're starting to get a better feel for what's going on, even though they're still very uncertain about what they're facing. And I think that's what Marchion Ro's done really well, though, is that while they've seen the effects of this creature and they continue to feel what it does, they don't really until they really understand what it is, then they can't really do much about it. And that's why I think a book like Midnight Horizon is so important there towards the end, when a certain little green fella shows up
finally
and gives you this idea that maybe he knows something.
Mm-hmm.
And it very much feeds right into some of your theories about why we're going back in time. Going back.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't
Thank you. Yeah. Huey Lewis and the News. You went from Bono to Huey. So thank you for doing that. Okay, let's continue on the good wagon here before we get into the not so good wagon. Bel Zettifar.
There's a lot of good.
Oh, I know. There's a lot of good, but this is just kind of we're gonna break all this down in a lot more detail when we get into the Patreon shows, and we will go, I wouldn't say chapter by chapter, but we're going to touch on a lot of the main story that happens with these characters. So look forward to that. I'm pretty excited about it. And then I got a couple of fun ones in here that I just enjoyed that we won't talk a whole lot about, which one of them I texted you on that, but okay. What was I saying? Oh, so Bel Zettifar.
Yeah, really great book.
I mean, come on. Like, if you're not in love with this guy by now and where he's at, again, another character that I feel like is very relatable. He's not always perfect. He's very grounded. He's very emotional, right? He's got a lot of emotion. He's dealing with it. He's trying to deal with it. And he's hearing, you got to turn this off. And at the same time, he can't not turn it off. And I don't know where he's going to land up, but he can't seem to get a break. I mean, it feels like one bad thing after another, and you feel like he's going to snap. But you think about it, there are some people out there in life that just have some of the most horrendous things happen to them. And they are just, they are better because of it, right? They come out better because of it. They have,
right. They don't just persevere. They have somehow used that and thrived in spite of it all.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
And he is to me one of those characters that it doesn't matter what's going to happen, you're not going to break him. It's just his resolve is such that it won't happen. I love the fact that he's, we even get inside of his head earlier on, where he's got on the first and foremost on his mind throughout this entire book, he's thinking of his master, and he's in this for the sense of, I wouldn't, not revenge, but certainly justice, and bringing them to justice. And some of the comments that he makes himself about, this is finally it, or we're finally going to show them, right? He's almost pepping himself up and psyching himself up for some of this stuff, which is great. In my theory, now I've coming out of this book, the other theory I had was that at some point Marchion Ro is going to die, and it would be poetic justice for it to be an older Bel Zettifar. That is the one that finally puts his saber through, Marchion Ro, and this is for my master. I mean, I know it sounds cliche and it's tropey and all that, but there is something now about that character that I feel like I just love about him so much, that he needs that, right? He needs to have that sense of justice being served, and in the name of his master, who we all loved. It was such a heartbreaking moment for us in the Rising Storm. So I do. I hope. I do. I'm pretty confident it is going to be him eventually that takes Marchion Ro out, and I can't wait to hear it. So, but what'd you think?
Well, Bel taking out Marchion would be very fitting, and maybe that's exactly when Keeve leaves the Order and assumes control of the Nihil. So maybe that plays right into
spilled my water, like spit my water out when you said that.
Hey,
because she's one of the fallen.
I'm trying to be more like
20 or whatever.
We know she's one of the fallen Jedi. And so what if this was
the lost 20 or 30? 40,
20,
whatever it is.
20.
Yeah.
But I mean, it seemed like it was supposed to be 20 at some point. Now it seems like that number is growing like weekly.
The lost 274.
Right. But I mean, Bel is Bel had such a great story, and where he's come from, especially at the end of Rising Storm, into this moment, it's such a turnaround. But he's not without concern still, and you feel it at the end of this one. So Burryaga goes missing. He's fighting the Rattar, kind of saves them from the Rattar, and disappears. Presumably fallen. They most believe he died. There was no way he could survive this. But Bel now has this just drive that he was wrong about, or he was right about Loden Greatstorm. If he would have just trusted himself that he was still alive, maybe he could have got to him.
Yeah.
Maybe things could have been different. And those are dangerous thoughts already, or they can be dangerous thoughts. But now it's almost like he's a little wild-minded, like, until I see a body, basically, which is kind of the theory we subscribe to.
Right. In Star Wars, you have to, yeah.
Until he sees confirmation that Burryaga didn't make it, he's going to look for his friend. And Elzar at the very end of the book, I think, was very understanding of that. And I had no intention of stopping you. Godspeed kind of thing. Good luck to you, and do you, and this is what we need to do. We need to be there for one another and not give up on one another. And so for Bel, though, but it's also a concerning spot too. Does he start moving more towards the point of obsession, and to where he is going to be a bit out of control and not be able to rein this back in? And for a young character, while he's made leaps and bounds and progress, he's still young, and he's still got a lot of growing up to do, and potentially going to be doing this on his own now.
Yeah.
And him and Burryaga I think this is one of the better parts of the story,
you're right.
too.
Yeah.
Him and Burryaga really, and they say, he says this often, right? We shouldn't have this kind of bond after so little time together, but they really did have a strong bond, and you really got the compassion of Burryaga that was really what Bel needed, especially when Indira got injured. And just to be able to have that character to lean on, and that they just got along so well, and they were really there for one another and had the same perspective on things, I think, too, that it really helped them both as about roughly the same stage of their Jedi careers. Yeah. But it was really nice that they had that type of relationship to where something like this is important to Bel, and the relationships within the Jedi are more than just colleagues. There's more to it. And it's okay for that to be okay, that there's more to these relationships. They shouldn't shy away from it entirely.
I at the very end there, when Elzar's like, okay, yeah, go. there's a part of me that feels like Elzar is probably. I mean, Elzar may think, look, he's dead. What's the harm in this kid going out and find him? You know, if he does, great, all the better. But there is a part of him that I think thinks that maybe he's just in that denial phase of grief. Right? He lost his really
Yeah.
close friend. They've been through a lot together. They went through a lot in this book together, specifically. But you know, he may just be grieving, and that's how, you know, he needs to kind of resolve that grief. But but the way Bell is so dedicated and stoic about it, like I don't get a sense that he's in denial. Like, I think he just truly believes that, hey, he's out there, he's still alive, and I'm going to find him. I'll prove to everybody that he's out there. And again, I don't believe that Boryaga is gone. I don't think it's just. I know there's some of these characters feel like it's too soon, too fast, and we don't get a lot of them, but there are certain characters that I feel like maybe aren't safe, 100% safe, but they're at least safe right now. Stellan Geos notwithstanding. But
Right.
but yeah, I do feel like he is going to be safe, and it would be great to see him come back. I don't know how he comes back. I mean, does he hold his breath when he's out in space? Does he get rescued? We'll get to that here at some point when we get to those
Somehow
characters.
Geode saved him.
Geode saves everybody. Come on, he's the real hero of all of this.
Yeah, he is the rock we all need.
Okay, so let's talk about that because it was for me one of the better groups. Leox and Geodes. The crew of the vessel was great.
Yeah.
I didn't. Affy, she kind of was third fiddle to me in a lot of ways. Like she had her moment. I think her bigger moments were in the other books, but in this one, it was kind of the Leox and Geode show, and them stepping up in the way they did. But I absolutely loved Leox, and you can throw even if you like strip away the Matthew McConaughey thing, it's still a good
No.
character. Well, I'm not saying no. I don't want to. He's from Austin. And I love the dude. He's kind of crazy too. But if you were to take that away, I think he's still a good character. I think the character stands on his own.
Right.
And it's not Matthew McConaughey. I mean, it's characters that he's played, but there are a lot of other characters that I think are in him that Matthew McConaughey has never played. But I did enjoy everything about him. I enjoyed Geode. I really liked the very end when you thought he was dead. It was kind of, I mean, to be fair, I never thought he was going to die. And the minute they
Right.
started playing up this, oh, I'm into old stuff and all that, and then he went out there, I was like, well, if it's him, he probably had a parachute. Like, that's the only logical explanation that he could have, right?
A parachute
In Star Wars.
yeah.
And then we get that, and I'm like, okay, good, because that was very fitting for the character. And yes, it was telegraphed very bluntly. I think at least for me, it was. But I still like it. I like that development of that character, that dimension of the character, that he is kind of obsessed with the old stuff. And it's fine for those things to happen for me, as long as we can continue to see it, right? If there are other instances, even if it's just minor, I'd like to see more of where Leox is leaning on old tech or old things to kind of solve new problems. And I don't know, maybe that's part of where we're going with this phase 2, but I did enjoy both of those. But what did you think about the vessel and the crew of the vessel?
I was actually surprised Leox really wasn't killed, because I think that would have been very emotional. You talk about really big loss, not only Stellan for the Jedi, but I mean, in the other Jedi too. There were other Jedi that besides Stellan that died that were really not great. But for Leox, that was such a rock of their group, if you will.
Ugh.
God, that's 2 already
You're
tonight.
terrible. Keep going though.
This is, I know, right?
Don't stop.
But he's the cornerstone of that group, and he really grounds Affy in so many different ways. But then Affy challenges him every once in a while too. So it's a really good relationship. And then Geode is just amazing. The way that Claudia Gray writes him, if you don't laugh every single time he's on the page, then you just don't get it. I'm sorry. I'm so sad that people don't get it.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of people out there who just don't get it, and they don't care for the character, or they just think it's a hokey or silly. I just think it's hilarious. And it's just absolutely expertly written every single time. I don't think she's written a bad page for Geode. I mean, he's a ladies' man now. It's awesome. He's always right there when you need him to lay your head on. He's immovable. He's magnetically sealed. He can just hold his breath, and he's magnetically sealed. I mean, there's nothing this guy can't do. So I liked it though. Again, I've said this before. Coley Lynn really felt short as an antagonist for that group. He just felt, I did not like the character, which was the point.
Yeah, he's a weasel.
But I also just didn't think he was all that inspiring of a character either, which was, again, probably the point. It was kind of something to add another layer of drama to what was going on with all of the, with the rest of the inhabitants of Starlight Beacon, how they couldn't get out. and what to do. But yeah, the crew of the vessel, I was hoping something would be lost, right? Even if it was just the vessel, and that would have been sad too. But really, they didn't really experience
No.
anything. They all kind of got out unscathed. And granted, you can't kill everybody off in once, but it was a little surprising that they didn't suffer a particular kind of loss. But in general, love the group. I like that Pika and Joss Adrian also linked up with them, and I think that was kind of a fun combination and a really complimentary type of relationship with them, especially when they needed help repairing the ships and trying to offset Coley Lynn's attempts at really just sowing chaos and furthering his own agenda because he hates Leox. But so I was glad that they made another appearance.
Yeah.
They weren't really super instrumental in a lot of the story, but it was still nice that they were still present. And maybe there's a story with them a little bit later on with Leox and the crew as well.
Yeah, I kind of took it they were kind of joining, even if it's just temporarily. It sounds like they're kind of with that crew now, which is fine because now you're talking about, what, 6 characters in total? No, 5 characters in total?
5, yeah.
So that's about right. And any more, then it gets too big and too sprawling. But I don't know, maybe they get their own little side quests and things that go on here now that they've got more.
We did learn something very important. There are insurance policies in Star Wars with ships because Joss and Pika took out a policy on their ship not long ago. Mm-hmm. So they can go get a new one.
Wow.
Insurance in Star Wars. Yeah. We have politics and now we have insurance.
There's everything. Before we go further, I think that was kind of rounding out my list of the good stuff. Except for one other one that I will in just a second. Let's just talk about now. The other one that I did text you about was I did listen to the audiobook on this one. So this is, the rollout, this has nothing to do with the book, okay? Because the book is the book and it stands on its own. But if we're being honest, the rollout of this whole phase or wave 3 was, man, that was a hot mess. Like,
it was a mess.
My goodness. Yeah. Like we were getting, and it's even just, there were production delays. I saw people posting, I ordered the book. It came, wasn't shipped on time. It was outside the hands of like Amazons and those guys. The stuff that happened beforehand, like the advanced reader copies that we were supposed to get, we didn't get those. We got the audiobook first, which I was like, oh, great. So I'm forced to listen to the audiobook, which I actually, and here's the blessing. And I'm getting to my point here of one of the things I really enjoyed. It wasn't bad. I enjoyed the audiobook. I listened at like two times speeds or 2.5 though, which
that's tough.
Yeah. And
that's fast.
It is pretty fast. But so I don't really get to listen to I don't ever hear like the character voices and the action and stuff. I'm just like focusing on the words and what's happening. That's how my mind works. But the point of this is when I got to the Merengue glide, or what was it called? The Morgenge glide, the music that they played. So there's a moment in there where Leox and those guys they come across the Nihil and they need a distraction of some sort. And so they start blasting this music out.
I forgot about that.
And
that was so
when
perfect.
I heard it, it was like beep, 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 like really fast, right? So I was like, well, let me slow this down because I'm just curious. Like, what does this sound like? Cantina radio thing, right? It was like right out of the 80s. Like it was like 80s synth pop music. And I'm trying to find like the copy who did this and all that still. And if I get it, I can't wait. But I was so excited that I texted Jonesy and was like, there's 80s synth pop or something in Star Wars now. It was so exciting. But I did really enjoy the music. As trivial as that sounds, that was a highlight for me of this book. So there.
This audiobook did have some different music in it than was typical. Because even when the last ones, when they had what do they call the Nihil's music?
Shri Kara? Oh, wait.
No.
The Nihil's music. The Wreck Punk.
Wreck Punk, there you go. Even when they had the Wreck Punk, they didn't really give you music to really link that up with anything.
I heard it was just like noise.
But with Leox, but with Leox, every time Leox has music, there's music for Leox and company. And it's great. It was very out of place for Star Wars. I get that, but it was very fitting for the scene. And it was very disorienting for the other characters, which I just thought was absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Well, I understand why that song was number 1, I guess, during that time. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Far, far away.
Okay.
I wonder if it was a solid goal.
But man, you're getting better at this, Jonesy. I'm so proud of you. You're really coming around. Like character growth right here is what we're seeing from you.
Well, and we had a comment in the chat that was really helped set that up to Logiven Baldwin. Matthew McConaughey plus a rock equals solid gold.
All right. Okay. Let's get into the stuff that didn't work. And I think at the core of it, like, again, I don't really have anything on here that are characters. The only character, well, we'll start with the character. The only character that I did not really care for that much, or I felt like every time it came in, I was just like, oh, do I have to read this again? And it was Nan and Chancey Yarrow. I don't know why. I mean, it just felt like I understand why they were there. And at the very end, okay, fine. She had to be cut in half. I love that part of it. But just the buildup of all that and them I don't know. It was not very compelling for me. Like, I don't know. It was kind of take it or leave it kind of thing. But that was really the only negative. And had it not been Chancey Yarrow, I don't think I would have cared one thing about those characters, really. If it had not been Nan and Chancey Yarrow, and I had not read, because I read the books before, I did have more of a connection with them. But if I hadn't, I would have been like, who the heck are these guys and why are they important? They end up being, from that perspective, they almost turn out to be just kind of like these unfortunate characters who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I don't know, it didn't work.
I agree. The other material that they've been in, the material they've been in before this were so much better.
Yeah.
Or they just fit the material maybe better, or maybe that's what it was. And at this point, it was almost inconsequential. They're a bit aloft at this point. So when Out of the Shadows, they end up working for the Graff family, is where they end. They're kind of independent contractors, but they're kind of indentured servitude of sorts too. And Nan doesn't really see the difference, but there's a debate in that. And I mean, some of the dialogue between them was okay. It was good, but you're right. It was a bit flat. It wasn't really anything super high or low. We didn't quite understand what it was that
what they were trying to do,
wanted to get. Yeah. I mean, and again, even at the end here, it's all directionless. And Nan is now potentially going to try to make her way back to the Nihil or something like that, even though she has basically a blank slate in front of her. She chose to, but she's aloft. Again, her character, man. Ever since. Yeah, that's true. She got the
Ace of Staves. Because whenever I think of that now, what song comes to mind?
The Ace of Staves.
Motorhead.
Right.
But go ahead, sorry.
Little Lemmy.
Yeah.
No, we've got to sing something again. We've done Hugh Lewis, now we've done Motorhead. I haven't done U2 yet, but I will. But they were so much better, like in Out of the Shadows, and Nan, of course, in what was it, Into the Dark, was such an instrumental character in the conflict with Wreath.
Yeah,
and the way that she was set up there, it was so much more compelling, I think, than what we ended up having here. And so it was a bit of an unfitting in for Chancey Yarrow, which I was disappointed about, because she got super smart, has a kid. She really misses her daughter a lot, but she is so out of, like, she doesn't, like, what she wants out of the galaxy is so completely different than what Silvestri wants. And she's just this little bit of a twisted mind, brilliant, but twisted. And so it kind of took an interesting character, and it kind of got lost in the shuffle with these other three Yahoos.
Yeah.
With the Nihil, which was a bit unfortunate in that regard, because they were okay characters and then just kind of fizzled a bit there. But I'm with you. I kind of don't care about Nan anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
and I cared about her a little bit for a while, and now it was just had to trudge through some of those pages a little bit, but it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, there was a level of like self-preservation there from them too. I did like that. I mean, they were out there I wouldn't say they were trying to be the heroes, but they were trying to preserve their own life by getting the thrusters back online for Starlight Beacon, because she knew too, like, hey, this is not going to end well unless we can get the thrusters back online.
Right.
But yeah, Chancey Yarrow's gone, so we don't have anything there. And then Nan just leaving. I mean, I don't know where that's going to go. I don't see
what's so frustrating too. I mean, Nan sees how the Nihil operate, and yet she still wants to go back to that mess.
That's what Bell said. You remember that at the very beginning of the book? I love that part where he's going through the ship when they captured one of the Nihil ships, and they're like, why go through all this to live like this? It's like a dump. These ships are all cobbled together, and they're in a lot of disarray, but the same kind of thing. It's like, why does she want to go back to the Nihil? I don't get it.
Exactly. I mean, and she sees what they're doing, and while I guess she agrees with the greater scope and the greater plan of what Marchion has, and she's a bit of a zealot for Marchion Row as well. But clearly they don't care. I mean, they sent these three to disable the ship, and now they're trying to prevent them from leaving because that wasn't part of the plan, and they being Chancey and Nan. And she wants to go back to all of that. I mean, I just don't. Maybe she's just the pomp of the Jedi really bothers her a lot, and so there's a whole story there, of course. But still, at some point, you're like, oh my gosh, some of these people just need a crowbar to the back of the head just to knock some sense into them, because they just don't. They're just incapable of being anything else besides what they are. It was the same thing with like Crix in the comics, right? With Zine Morala, the characters that they could have chosen something different, but they just don't want to.
Yeah.
Basically, they can't let go of whatever grudge they had forever, and then they just can't seem to grow beyond whatever it is they think that they're capable of, and they have to give into their most basic, instincts effectively.
I want to talk about Zine,
rather
but
than trying to rise above it. Yeah, Lula Zine's a cool story too. I really can't wait to do Midnight Horizon.
Let's just do that now. Okay, we're going to talk about Go read Midnight Horizon, please, so you can join us in the conversation if you haven't already. Or let me know, and I'll let you borrow my book, too.
So one of the things that was difficult for me in this book was this felt like the first book where I really had to know what was going on in other books. Yep. This is the first one that really felt like, and Lauren and I had talked about this a handful of times, where usually you could pick up into the books and you could generally get a pretty good idea where things stood, who the characters were. You got on board pretty quick. You got up to speed pretty quick. But this was the first one where I really felt you had to read Out of the Shadows. It really helped if you read Into the Dark. You had to read Rising Storm.
Sure.
It helped to have more knowledge there was a lot more going around it. And part of that's, I think, because everything was kind of encapsulating to this moment. So I get that. And that makes a lot of sense to me. But it was the first time where we've been able to tell people, jump into any part of the High Republic, do it while you're early because you can get there, and you don't have to work too hard to get at it. But this one really felt like if you didn't have all of that, you were probably lost. I imagine about a quarter of the time. It was a pretty considerable amount of time. 20 to 25% of the story relied heavily on the characters and where they've already been, because they weren't going to be able to rehash all of that at the same time.
Yeah,
So I don't know if that's a criticism as much as maybe just an observation, but and you're going to get to this point anyway, right?
Yeah,
but it was just the first time it was like in my face, like, oh wow, if I didn't know this stuff, I would be lost.
I don't know if I had much of a problem with it, because I think at this point, we're how many books now into this series? And I think we said this going in.
I guess technically 9.
Yeah,
right?
we said this on one of the shows. Like, if you're thinking you're going to pick up the Fallen Star and just kind of jump in, this is not the book to do it in, right? There's so many other books that came out before this. It's like trying to go and pick up a book in the middle of like New Jedi Order, and it's like, yeah, you probably could get by, but why would you want to start there at that point? You'd probably want to start at the beginning. But
is it a fair criticism if you picked up the adult novels that you should be able to follow that story?
No, 100%. I agree with you there. That from that perspective, yes, there are certain things. Like, I'll give you the most egregious one, and I don't know if this was it feels like it's a timing issue, but Gira, what's her name? Gira Staros, yeah, Senator Gira Staros. Like, this is what bothers me. Like, she shows up in the book, and even when I was reading, I had the advanced copy, so I was thinking, well, maybe this is, I didn't understand what was going on. Let me just put it that way. I'm like, how did she get here? Like, how did she go from being the senator just a senator that we knew, with a long history of people there's a lineage there, to suddenly like in bed, almost literally, if she was, I think she was, in bed with Marquion Rowe. Like, yeah, okay, props to Rowe, but come on, like, how did this even happen? I didn't understand where that was coming from. And then after the book had come out, the Star Wars Insider, the first part of the Star Wars Insider story came out. And like, people are not, Star Wars Insider is an awesome book or magazine or whatever the heck it is. But how many people actually are sub to that? It's not a lot. And
because it's like so expensive.
It's very expensive. Yeah. But I have it, but only because I'm stupid and I keep paying for this thing. But there are stories in there, and there are some characters that have kind of crossed over now. But that is one that's key, because that storyline of how she switched over was in Star Wars Insider. So if you were just I'm picking up the adult novels, then you were screwed. And even if you were a good person and read all the other books that came out, you were still screwed, because you didn't know how she got there unless you were a subscriber. And that's So that's the only problem. And I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's fair criticism or not, to be honest, because who was this book really for? I think it's for at this point, it's for everybody that's just on board and I'm sticking with it. I don't think there's anybody that's kind of like, yeah, I'm still kind of feeling myself out in this whole High Republic thing. And I think if you are interested in the High Republic and you haven't been following, I think you are generally going to go start at the beginning and you're going to pose that age old question now of like, where do I start? What book should I start with? What is the reading order? Right. But there were moments in here where I felt like, okay, I liked all these. I liked all the character connections, but I think I'm like probably the 1% that's been reading all the books and all the comics and all the short stories. So I don't know. I just wonder how did people enjoy this novel if all they were reading were the adult novels? Were they lost, like you said? Because I'm with you. I think there were a lot of references that were lost, and maybe, hopefully, I guess the best scenario is that you read them and they kind of just left your mind, but you didn't dwell on them, right? You weren't going, I want to know more about that. I think that was the best case scenario, but I don't know that I've heard a lot of feedback from people saying they loved it or hated that fact, to be honest.
Well, so I don't have Star Wars Insider, so I don't see all the short stories. And so when your Star Wars showed up, I was very taken aback. I was confused because before we knew that Markion had a mole in
the Senate,
or in Lena So's kind of vicinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was an aide, right?
It was one of the aides. It wasn't a senator. God, it wasn't a senator. No.
And so, and so if you didn't read Out of the Shadows, you didn't even know that there was any kind of weird conflict with Staros and the Jedi or anybody else. In that book, you get an idea there's tension and she's up to something, but I don't think they really clarify that or resolve any of that to where you get to this book and all of a sudden she's, basically trying to sow the doom of the Jedi and of the Republic as a senator. Why would a senator do this? I don't, some things are just, they kind of make you shake your head and you're unsure about, but that was one thing I was very taken aback because I'm glad you said there's a short story. I need to go read this, I guess, to see what that's all about because I was lost. I was like, okay, I guess she doesn't like how things are going and she's going to do it herself, but or she's just, maybe you can just give us a really quick high level overview of it.
Well, no,
pull the pieces.
Well, I'm going to kick you in the nads real quick because the second,
nice.
the first story came out after the book was released, and then you had to wait until like last week, I think, before part 2 came out. So I haven't even read the second story yet. I don't even know exactly. I just know that was
who wrote the short stories.
I think it was Justina Ireland on these. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but I think it was Justina Ireland.
I think that sounds right.
But yeah, we just got the most recent issue, at least digitally. Now, if you're a subscriber like to the physical copies, where the real money's at, those they generally come in a little bit earlier. But again, like who's buying who's getting the physical copies these days? And it's a very, very small niche group of people, honestly.
Would you say that piece is selling?
Who's buying? There we go. Nice way to work in Megadeth into the show. This is the fourth reference now that we've gotten. I want to go to the comments. Low-Given Baldwin had chimed in and said, yes, I only read the adult novels, so I'm realizing I need to read the comics. Then he went on to say, I wasn't lost, but definitely would have liked more context. So thanks for kind of being there, your testimony, because I think that's probably what a lot of folks are kind of going through. But
yeah, you just feel like the entire time you're missing something and you feel like it's you. Like, I hate it when you read a book and you're like, I'm missing something and it's just got to be me. I'm not intelligent enough to understand what I'm reading.
I keep reading this over and over again.
And I am missing something. What am I missing? I'll go back and try to reread something. and it's just not there. And it's backstory that they'll fill in later or, that they just leave you kind of hanging on. But it seemed pretty critical. So I'm glad that they're at least, fleshing that story out a little bit. But man, it was a bit taken aback that a senator, and then the senator, again, the way that she was written, she was very meek, in my opinion.
Like, what's her angle? Is what I wanted to know too. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, the whole reasoning behind this is just unclear and makes very little sense. And she really just seems like an infatuated schoolgirl, and that's so unlike a senator, how I picture a senator, right? When we look at our senators, they're very strong men and women. They're very, they just seem very well put together for the most part. I mean, they all have their agendas. I get that, but they don't come across as love struck in any kind of way. So it was very it just seemed very contrary to how I would picture a
Yeah.
politician, especially with how much she stood up to Stellan Geos and Out of the Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll quit harping on it, but I mean, it's really difficult when you read a book and you feel like you're lost. Like I don't understand why I'm reading this. Now, granted, Claudia Gray got us past all that pretty quickly
Right.
to where you could just enjoy the story, but it's always lingering in the back of your head. Like, what did I miss?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. So I'm trying to go through the stuff that kind of fell short. So the one thing, so I think we talked about the characters now at least, and that was really my only gripe was Nan and what's her name? My goodness, Yarrow.
Chansey.
But so the other thing that I had, and I want to be sensitive here about this because this book felt a little constrained for me. Like again, I enjoyed the book. You definitely need to go read it. It's awesome. I really loved it, but I wanted more of this sprawling kind of like storyline, kind of like we had in The Rising Storm in Light of the Jedi, where it felt larger, more on a galactic scale. To me, this felt like a more like a revved up version of Into the Dark, right? We're on a space station. It was similar in that regard. We never really left the space station, and we didn't really get to see a lot of the space station, honestly. Like Starlink, like this story primarily takes place in 3 or 4 locations for the most part. We didn't really get to understand the intricacies of it or get to see a lot of the pieces of it, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying we had to have that, but and to kind of counter myself, I was thinking so. In every one of the movies, for the most part, we had this really grandioso kind of story being told. Maybe with the exception of Return of the Jedi, I was trying to think like
I think Last Jedi was pretty
narrow in scope too. It just there was something about it that didn't feel like I don't know. I can't think of the word. It didn't feel like a galactic war. Like it just felt like we were so focused on this space station that we didn't really get to see. So it felt a little claustrophobic in that regard. And by the end of it, and because they had already shown us what was going to happen, right, with the posters and all of that, like a part of me would have felt better, I think, if they had not shown that and I had read the book and because even until they did that, we were still wondering, what is the fallen star? Like, what is it? Is it a person? Is it Starlight Beacon? We didn't know. I think that would have probably worked better for me. But because they did show it, then I was like, okay, well, now the focus is not on what's going to happen. The focus primarily on what's going or how or what happened, but how it happened, right? How did we get there? And I thought there were moments and we had the sense of dread with the Rathgars. Of course, the Nihil were kind of running around trying to mess things up. We had the levelers in there. There's moments when the ship starts getting torn apart, so there was all that. And then we just kind of had this overall sense of dread coming from the Jedi the entire time and them feeling disconnected with the Force and things not right. They all could sense it. They could all feel it. And we got a really good example of this when, was it Bell? I think when he actually left, he was like, he could suddenly felt like this relief of like, whoa, I know I'm no longer on there and things were really going bad. So the sense of dread was there, but again, I'm going to go back to where I said maybe my expectations were too high because of Titanic.
Kind of felt like Apollo 13. I was trying to figure out what it felt like. It felt kind of like Apollo 13.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. For me, I think where I'm saying is it fell short is it felt too confined. And I think the confinement would have been fine had it been offset with more dread, more things going wrong, right? There wasn't enough for me to kind of offset that. And I hope I'm making sense. I hope I'm not. I don't think I am.
No, I think you are. So when we know the space station is going to get destroyed. We know one or more are going to die. It puts a lot of emphasis on every moment that gets you to those moments. Mm-hmm. And each one of those has to be really, they have to feel significant almost. And it's a really difficult feat to accomplish, especially if you're focused in on those stories at a very close view. You've really got the microscope on them to where that you really have to feel that. Now, I think she was very successful, especially when it came to the levelers and just the dread that came with the levelers, because I felt like it was always there. Anytime a character seemed a little off, like I started questioning, okay, is there a leveler nearby? Like, especially when the one was near Stellan and
the door
shut
came down.
Blast door effectively. Yeah. I mean, that was like, okay, wow, that was.
I thought he was going to go.
So
which was good. Yeah. But
I thought so too. I was like, oh wow, they are going to do it. And then when he survived that, I'm like, okay, well, Stellan's safe. Oops,
A surprise.
But right, but again, I think you're right. I think this is where some aspects of the story had to be there. So Leox and company, and what was going on in the hangar, but they were a little bit. They weren't as strong. It wasn't where the interest was. It wasn't what the real, the real tension was supposed to be. But we still had to keep going back to these places. And then the Nihil were kind of a distraction from some of that. And again, we had moments where our characters, were able to achieve something or went through more stuff because of those moments. But they all seemed very ancillary too, into where we were really just in the control center most of the time.
Yeah.
And really just trying to figure out what was going on. And again, well executed from that respect. But I'm with you. It did feel like a smaller story. And for lack of a better word, kind of a more intimate story, because again, you're just in one place for pretty much the entire book. I think actually maybe the entire book. I don't know if we ever left.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we did at the beginning. Yeah, Orla and Elzar were off planet over on Letelau.
Letelau? Was that the name of the planet? I remember that planet.
Yeah, Letelau, and then Chespie is where the temple was at that they
bombed the hell out of it. Yeah, those poor guys.
That was really sad. Yeah. Send a note to Starlight Beacon that we are no more. I mean, that was just. Yeah, that was not cool.
Yeah, there's a name. I'm trying to think of the name of it. There is a name for when TV shows or movies or whatever take place in a single kind of location, because it does work. I mean, you think like Die Hard, right? That takes place on Nakatomi building or whatever it is. The Titanic, we talked about that one. I'm not saying that I mean, it can work. It definitely can work, but there's got to be when you're not doing that, there's a lot that needs to go into, like you said, because the focus now is just there. You almost have a fixated lens on all of that, and you really got to kind of have to hit everything out of the park sometimes, unfortunately, at least for me. And that's kind of where it was. So the criticism there is, again, it just didn't feel grand in scope, and it was smaller, and that didn't feel, I wouldn't say it didn't feel Star Wars, because it definitely felt like Star Wars, but for an adult novel, it didn't feel that way. Like, I could see this as a young adult novel. More than an adult novel. And it wasn't written as a young adult novel. It was definitely written as an adult novel. And it was probably, I think it was the shortest of the three so far. Like, this barely came in at.
This was 5.
No, it wasn't that many. I grabbed it. I grabbed it.
Let's
grab
right
behind these
me.
real quick so we can check. It definitely is
thinner.
About
300, less than 350.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, less than 350 pages. By the way, I haven't had a chance to show this one on the air. You can't see.
Oh, the Goldsboro book.
Yeah, the Goldsboro has this is a bright yellow, but I think it's coming across as a dull yellow on the video feed right now. But yeah, this is really cool. And you get a cool jacket. So like this protective jacket on there as well. So all of
Oh, yeah, it's got the glossy.
Yeah, the glossy front on them. So it protects the book.
I like that better than the green. I like that better than the green one they did for the
Rising Storm. Yeah. But anyway, so
I think some of it was like, so they would go back to talk with Lena So just 2 or 3 times, I think, and they did a little bit on the planet of Irem with Queen Thandeka and her wife, the other queen, but we didn't really ever get a whole lot of sense of how the galaxy was viewing what was going on. It was talked about, but we didn't really feel. I didn't feel it of how the galaxy would actually be interpreting what they were seeing, and they. It seems like this would be a really significant moment for everybody that's part of the Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And now there was a couple of moments where they had these leaning on, well, we really are all the Republic because we all share in this pain, and we all, what was going on in Irem, they all, cared about that, and the way that the Jedi were able to, somewhat fix the desalinization plant, using the Force and kind of writing it on the Moors or whatever. Those were important, but again, it didn't really, and they give you kind of signs of hope in some ways, but I think without that perspective, that outside the external perspective, besides Marchion Ro, it's really difficult to pull yourself out of what was going on at a very, very low level and actually understand the impact and the fallout, which again would presumably come later, that we're not going to get for over a year.
Ugh.
And because all of the other books are all leading up to Fallen Star in this wave, and all the comics are the same way. There's nothing that goes after Fallen Star, I believe. I think everything ends right before Fallen Star or as Fallen Star is going on. So there's really nothing after Fallen Star,
Coming?
which is, well, I think at all. I mean, High Republic Adventures is done. High Republic, I think, is done at issue 15,
Yeah.
and the Midnight Horizon.
Oh,
and,
but phase 3 though, right? I think we're assuming is going to be
well, phase 3,
right.
but not for another
Sure,
year
sure,
plus,
yeah.
right? I mean, this is like a year and a half
Yeah.
away, almost 2, before we get anything for phase 3. So it's a very long time to not have any kind of sense of the fallout.
The term that I was looking it up, the term is called a chamber film or a chamber piece or a chamber drama, where the events of something take place in a very confined space or one location. So now that we've got that out of the way, okay. So that was
Right. That was
it was driving me nuts. You wouldn't even know right now. Let's see. So the other, I guess, let's see. I talked about the chamber piece of it all. Avar Chris. That's a personal problem with me. Because I don't know. I mean, we didn't get her in. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this decision. Like, on one hand, I like it. One hand, I don't. If you're an Avar Chris fan and you're wondering where the heck she is, go read the comics. Like, there's a lot of Avar Chris in the comic books, in the main title of the High Republic comic. And because we got so much of her in Light of the Jedi, and then we got nothing in Rising Storm, very little in the Rising Storm. We got very little in this one until the very end. And even then it was like, oh, she's here. And you're like, oh, hallelujah. She's finally made it to Starlight Beacon. I can't wait to see how she's going to jack these guys up. And then she disappears, right? The ship separates and we don't know. And then that whole part of that story doesn't come back until the comic. It's kind of like what you were saying, right? They were kind of working in tandem. I think part of the problem too was the comics are still coming out. Like, it feels like the story that we were given, almost 2 months ago. When did that comic come out? It was like 2 weeks ago, or was it the last issue?
Last issue hasn't come out yet.
No, I meant like the last issue was the first one that kind of talked about where they were, I guess, and what was going on there in that moment.
Yeah, issue 14 really, bumped really up close to when Avar started going back to
Starlight Beacon. Yeah. So it felt like the comic. I don't know if the comic was delayed, but I don't.
There have been some printing, some distribution and printing issues.
Yeah, so some of that was kind of factoring. But I guess my point was, Avar Chris is somebody that I think a lot of people continue to say really want to see her more, and people are very quick to go, oh, well, just go read the comics. But okay, yeah, but I the comics are great. I actually like them, but I want to read about her. I want her to be in these adult novels as one of the firebrands, as one of the main 3 characters, because we had her in Light of the Jedi. We were teased. And I wonder how much of it is kind of like the Yoda effect, like we've talked about, and
ironically, we got something with Yoda that we've been looking forward to for a while.
Yes.
But we haven't come back to Avar in that kind of way.
Yeah. But I mean, she is kind of like the Luke. She is the Yoda, right? You put her in, once she's in there, she is so powerful that you really kind of have to figure, like, she can start jacking with the story, if you will. I mean, you got to challenge them in some way. So some of that is probably but
I think we've got that now, though, with the levelers. I think
a neutralizing effect with her. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
agree. I think this is where and we've talked about it a few times with High Republic in general, just the strategy is this something that works, and is this, going across the different mediums. And you're right. There's a huge difference between a 32-page comic that comes out once a month or every other week or whatever it is, compared to a 350-page book where you can spend a third or more of it dedicated to a character in various ways, right? I mean, you can literally have a character in over 150 pages of this book and learn so much within the context of that in one sitting effectively, or in one piece of work, rather than having to wait months for what would equate to really, maybe a dozen pages every month. The scale's just not there. There's only so much you could do within it. Yeah, I mean, the mediums are supposed to be a completely different way of storytelling. But you're right. I mean, it's different when you spend so much time with a character and they kind of disappear and you got to go find out the other adventures in the background, which I would argue the story that they told in the High Republic comics has been an important one to tell.
Yeah,
sure. And it wrapped up a lot. I mean, and that's the thing that's kind of frustrating with the Drengir, right? If we kind of pull back and look at phase 1, which we're doing with some friends of ours here soon. When you look at that, the Drengir were like just completely dropped unless you read the comics, and they were pretty important in that. But otherwise, you just feel like, okay, well, they're gone, I guess.
I mean,
Nothing happened. It kind of feels like that with Avar.
yeah. And in what books did we get them in? And they were Into the Dark. They didn't really show up for the most part in Rising Storm. They showed up in
reference.
They were referenced, but they were in Race to Crash Point Tower. So yeah, I mean, to your point, it's like, yeah, okay, so what? Like they were, and to be fair, I mean, maybe the jury's still out. We don't. Although I know they were on Starlight Beacon, though, I think too, weren't they? Didn't they put them at the bottom of Starlight Beacon?
Oh no, they were inside the hut, but that was in the comic.
No, well, no, not that. I meant like when they captured them, they went somewhere and they like put them in that, when Avar put them in that whole state of sleeping mode again.
Oh yeah,
they moved them somewhere.
That's how they.
But I can't remember if it was a Jedi temple, or if it was Starlight Beacon at the bottom of Starlight Beacon. I think it was Starlight Beacon.
Oh boy, yeah, it might be.
Because I remember reading the book and thinking, well, if they survive, are they thriving down there? Did they release the Drengir again? Are they going to be gone? I don't. So that's a whole nother story. But yeah, your point's well taken. Like, unless you were reading the comics, you wouldn't even know that to begin with, because they don't reference it even in this book, you know?
Right. But there's also only so deep you can get with a character in the comics. I mean, again, it's only 15 issues of High Republic, and a lot of it's been really focused on Skier and Keeve.
Yeah.
All right, and Avar's been in there, off and on, but it's really been Skier and Keeve that have been a huge part of that, and it's been really more their story than anybody else's. And so I think I don't know if I'd call it criticism. I think the disappointment with Avar being a bit missing from a huge chunk of Phase 1 is disappointing, and it's very. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to understand, I guess, a bit. And again, if you're just trying to say, okay, well, she's just the super Jedi, and you can't have Superman in everything. Well, even Superman has kryptonite. So, and we found the Jedi's kryptonite.
Yeah.
So why couldn't we have all of that at one time? And I get it. None of the Jedi are around, and it creates conflict between Stellan and Avar, which started developing in other context, right? It started developing in the comics, also developed in Out of the Shadows. So, it's how you get Stellan where he's at, in the position he's at, and he's not supposed to be there, right? It's his day off.
Yeah. What?
Sorry, Clerks reference for everyone.
Oh, Clerks. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? Days off? I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So what other? Before we got to get out of here, because we're almost coming up on 2 hours, and a lot longer than I thought we go, but that's okay. Did you have anything? Because I was looking at my list, like I don't have a lot of horrible detail. I don't have a laundry list of things that were horribly wrong with this book.
Right.
Those are my things, and they're probably personal and nitpicky, but what did you have?
I think there was only one other, and we touched on it really early on. Orla Jareni.
Oh man, yeah.
Really,
that one hurt.
They really did it really did. I mean, they really brought her up so well working with Elzar, and it really felt like we were getting to know her.
Yep.
And just how interesting she was. And again, there's other relationships going on that we started learning about, and her interactions with Comac, and that was all necessarily in this book. But then also just this conflict between her and Stellan. Where does it come from? What is Stellan's perspective on way seeking? Why did she go about doing it? And there's just so many questions that now it feels like we're not going to get answers unless another Jedi goes and does way seeking.
Yeah, or in the past, now, we learn more about them too, right? If we go back to in Phase 2. But still, it's not through Orla, and that's somebody
it's not Orla,
exactly,
right? Yeah. And it's and Orla's appeared on the cover of comic books, and so they kind of built this character up, but it felt like we didn't really spend near as much time with her as I really wanted to. And I know she was in another book, but this one really felt like that loss. It's just really, that one hurt. It hurt a lot. And I know it hurt Elzar a lot. And that was the point. And now he's lost both of his pole stars, if you will. He lost the pole star with Stellan, but he also missed the grounding point that was Orla, of what he felt like he needed, especially as he was recovering from the events of Rising Storm. And that one really hurt, because the character, I think I really started to like her a lot. I liked her attitude. I liked the way that she was able to keep other characters in check and really be that counterbalance to Stellan, besides it being Elzar, where you still felt that there was a history beside them. But Orla also was just very direct and to the point. And she's at one point she's basically like, you look like hell.
Yeah.
Like you look like death itself. Yeah. And Elzar was taken aback, like, wow, I thought I was direct. I've got nothing on Orla. But again, it just kept building this. There was this backstory that they kept kind of flirting around and didn't find any kind of resolution or really any kind of exploring of that story. And that was just I was sad, I guess, more than anything. I wasn't necessarily disappointed because again, it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be part of the story, but I was just more sad that we weren't going to get it because it sounds like there's a lot of cool stuff within that. And I don't know how that would come out or if it ever will.
No, I'm with you on the fact that I wouldn't say I didn't care for her, but she was just kind of there prior to this novel, even, having read about her in some of the other ones. But
Right.
this was the first one where I was like, wow, it almost felt like I wouldn't say a different character, but we just got to see more of her and we got to understand more of her. And you start to realize like, wow, this is a really cool character. This is great. She's getting her moment. And then, she passed. And so with that, and again, my whole thing about characters is I don't mind if they die. I just don't like them to die in vain. Like I feel like there really needs to be a purpose. So I'm hoping that now that Elzar Mann has lost two important people in his life, we're going to see something come of that, good or bad. Like I'm fine if it's a horrible thing too. In fact, I probably would appreciate that more. So I just want there to be something, want there to be meaning from a narrative perspective when a character dies, and somebody like Orla Jareni and just how important and pivotal she was to Elzar Mann because she kind of got him back on his feet and was pretty straightforward with him and really taught him a lot that I don't think he would have gotten from anybody trained in the Jedi Temple, much less somebody like Stellan Gios.
You really need that strong counterpoint
Yeah.
to get you over that hump.
Yep.
Yeah.
And by the way, so if that was your only other thing, I was just for anybody that's listening to the show and just kind of wanted to know like who all died. We probably should just quickly talk about that. So we had Chancey Yarrow. So we mentioned she gets the old slice down the middle there, gets cut in half. We had Coley Lynn, and he was kind of like this. He's kind of a whiny. The entire time I just wanted to like shut up, sit down, shut up, and somebody would tie him up, and that was the point, right? I mean, he was supposed to be that super annoying character that you just were hoping would die, and he does.
Yeah. Just likes to start trouble for the sake of starting trouble.
He was an
Right.
a-hole. And
He was a
excuse my
tool,
language.
yeah.
But yeah, there was and he dies because at one point he decides he's going to shoot Geode with a blaster, and you come to find out that Geode has a way to kind of churn his body into like a
magnetically sealed
magnetically sealed. Would you forget it already? Troy tried it. It's magnetically sealed. That whole line from Luke Skywalker, he's whining in the garbage chute, which is 3263827, by the way, if anybody wants to know. That's the trash compactor number. But yeah, so he ends up, and then so the blaster bolt reflects off of Geode and it hits him, and Geode's the hero, which I thought was again funny and fitting. So he's dead. There was a Jedi that we've not even mentioned, which was Reginald Cole.
Reginald
Call.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure how they said it in the audiobook. And he was kind of this is the first time that we'd ever seen him. He was fine. He seemed kind of like a, I don't know, laid back, lazy Jedi. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right word.
He seemed like a desk Jedi.
A paper pusher kind of Jedi of some sort.
Kind of.
He was fine. But he did die. I think he died at the hands of one of the levelers, if I'm not mistaken.
He did, yeah.
He got his whole mind sucked out and all that. We talked about Orla Jareni dying at the hands of another leveler. So she went the hard way there. And then Nib Asik. So Burryaga's master died again at the hands of a leveler. So there were three Jedi. Those are the three Jedi, the primary Jedi that were taken by the levelers. Estella Maru, like I never, like they don't explicitly say he dies, but I remember at the very end of the book, they're talking about it. And I guess it would be fitting given he was kind of like the main commander of like, he ran everything on Starlight Beacon. So you would think he would go.
He knew everything that was going on.
Yeah, you would think he went down with the ship, I guess, from that perspective. But then who was really the captain, right? Was it him or was it Avar Chris? And we'll get into that too, because there's a whole piece of that I thought was really interesting. The dynamic between Stellan Gios and Avar Chris and how much he was like resented the fact that she left and kind of left her post. Yeah. And he took it upon himself to step in. And I got to wonder like how much of this is going to really sink in for Avar Chris when she realizes that he died because she left, right? Because she got so obsessed with tracking down the eye, which she thought was Lorna D, not Markion Rowe, that Stellan ended up going into this position. And, had I stayed, what would have happened? Would things have been different? I wonder if that's going to be explored, a year from now when we get to phase 3.
Right. She didn't necessarily agree with him when they were arguing.
Oh, yeah. No, they had some good fights. Like, there was some good conflict that was going on there, which I think we needed too, because sometimes it gets too goody two-shoes with the High Republic.
Right.
But yeah, so Stella Maru, I guess he's dead, and I think that's fine. I really enjoyed him, but mostly from the comics. And again, that's a character that in the comic book, he pops up every once in a while. But in the books, I think they've only mentioned him once. I think it was in either Light of the Jedi or the Rising Storm. Maybe he was in both, but it was a very, very small amount.
Right.
You didn't know anything about him, right?
And he was in both sets of comics, both the High Republic Adventures and the main flagship.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we had the Nihil, Cal, Lilo, and Warrera.
Yeah.
I don't know. They were fine. They served it. They were going to die anyways, and they were happy about it. We talked about Coley Lynn and the Ace of Staves. And Coley Lynn was
Buriago.
What's that?
Yeah, Buriago. We don't know about Buriago.
Yeah, and Buriaga's the last one, I guess. Sorry.
Well, and again, Buckets of Blood.
Well, not from this book, but the comic, though, right?
Not from this book, right? But another Jedi that we don't know the fate of.
I like when they call him Master Buckets, by the way.
Master Buckets is great.
Master Buckets. Mr. Bucket. That's for my brother who just showed up. He knows what that is.
Yeah. Alex says, "Hi, everyone. What did I miss?" I guess we can start over.
Let's start. We'll go ahead and restart the whole show for you, dude. I don't think he's even read these books, which is fine, but he'll ask questions about it all day long. But yeah, so Buriaga, and I know
that's good because you like to talk.
Yeah, I do like to talk.
So it works out really well.
It really does. Lauren, I know, said that she doesn't want anything to happen to Bell and Ember, and then same thing with Buriaga. And I know there's a lot of people that really like Buriaga. It's hard not to sympathize with that character, given he is so like empathetic and he connects with people on a very emotional level, even though nobody understands what he's saying. And he's got that awkward, we learned a lot about him in the comics and that sort of in the books, I should say, not comics. We learned a lot about him in the book. So, he disappears fighting Rathars. Yeah. What was it? Did he get sent out into space as well? Jettisoned?
That's what they made it sound like.
It sounded like they found a way to jettison the Rathars into space, and he was he was part of it, or I don't remember
he was wrapped up in one of the.
That's what it was. Yeah. One was kind of holding him as they did that. So I would say, I don't know how, the odds are pretty slim, but we got Darth Maul and Spider Legs, so anything's possible.
True. Yeah. Wookiees are hardy stock.
Yeah. Look at Black Hay. Was able to fix his leg in mere seconds.
Right. Pop that ankle back into place.
But so that's it. That's the body bag count, the blood count, or death watch if you want to go that route. No pun intended on that one. But that quite a few people, quite a few characters did die.
Well, and 3 noteworthy characters.
And Stellan Geos. Sorry.
Yeah. We have with Stellan and Orla Jareni and Nibasik. Stellan and Nib have been in other material.
Mm-hmm.
Orla's been in and out of some of the material as well. So it wasn't inconsequential characters, some things that will reverberate for a while. Although I've been a little disappointed, like some of the, aside from Loden Greatstorm, some of the other deaths in High Republic haven't felt like they've had as much impact or lasting impact. And maybe that's maybe that means they're being good Jedi. They miss their masters, but they grieve and then they kind of move on and accept it. But it doesn't seem like they've been, aside from Loden for Bell, they haven't really been felt that deeply until, potentially, these ones, of course, will reverberate for a while.
And we don't know,
I guess Stellan, but.
Well, I think where we're seeing a lot of the grief and struggle is coming from the younger ones, the younger kids. And I want to see Vanessa, like what's going to happen with Vanessa Rowe. Like that's the one I'm really looking forward to, because Vanessa, her master was Stellan Geos. And there is a moment, I think, in this book. Wasn't there a moment in this book where they did call each other? I can't remember now. Or that was in Rising Storm?
I can't remember, because in Out of the Shadows, he had sent her on a mission. I don't know. I'll tell you, I'm about 70 pages from the end of Mission to Disaster.
Oh.
So I'll see if Vernestra has a touch point there with Stellan, or what happens if she ends up going towards a Starlight Beacon.
Yeah. Well, either way, she's going to be reeling from his death. And and we saw the same thing, like, well, we won't see it from Buriaga, but we may at some point. We saw it with Bell, and who else is there? Orla didn't have one.
Well, I mean, Elzar will feel that for Orla.
Yeah, for sure.
And Vitus Comac actually with Orla.
Oh yeah,
because again with Midnight Horizon, he learns of that, and we learn that there's a bit of history there too. And so I won't spoil that one until we get to that book. But
yeah, they tease that.
Please go read Midnight Horizon.
They did tease that relationship in Out of the Shadows, I think, or was it Into the Dark?
Into the dark. Yeah,
okay. Yeah. So yeah, wow, man, yeah. Like the more you think about this, like yeah, you really did need to kind of like you didn't have to, but wow, the amount of context it would have helped had you read all these other books.
I mean, it was bound to happen at some point, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, you can't have you can't have 8 other books going on around your world for over a year and not be able to start leaning on that material for it to actually have any kind of gravity to it, any kind of weight. That emotional connection. I mean, if you don't have that, then it doesn't work. But I think that's the part that's maybe challenging for folks is that there's a lot of content that they need to then consume to get to that point. And that can be a little daunting sometimes.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. I think we'll end the show on that note. And again, we've got quite a few more episodes to go. And if you missed the very beginning of the show, just again to recap, we're going to take some of the characters and bundle them up together and do deeper dives into their storylines from the Fallen Star. But we're going to do that on the Patreon. And then on the main show, we'll get into the other stuff that's going on with the High Republic, like the Eye of the Storm comic, Midnight Horizon we've talked about. We're going to go back and visit this Jedi's End, which I think is that last arc in the High Republic comic. So by the end of the next 5 weeks, I think, both between Patreon and the general releases, we should be pretty well caught up on all things High Republic, which is really exciting because we've not talked about it lately.
The goal is to not run into Kenobi.
Yeah, exactly.
We should just give ourselves a little wiggle room here.
Yep.
Give ourselves all the way through mid-May. Hey, a quick few shout-outs here before we get ready to wrap up. Stephanie, Jonathan, Lauren, Katya, Qui-Gon J. We had... Twan was in here for a little while. Thanks, Twan, for showing up. Who we just had? We just had another one on there. Logiven Baldwin. I hope I'm saying that right. Risk, of course, Alex. And we appreciate all and a lot of great comments tonight, and especially some of the new folks. So, again, we do a live stream, usually on Sundays and Thursdays. We actually live stream both. One's a Patreon, one's a general show, but we open it to everybody. So we'd love to have you come out. Just pay attention to our social media, which is usually at the Cantina Cast or at Cantina Cast in one of those fashions. IrgleMedia.com. Of course, you can come talk to us on Discord too. IrgleMedia.com/Discord. We put an event in there, so you've always got a reminder of when it is, and there's a quick link, and you just go hit it, and it pops you right over here into YouTube. So we would love for you to join us. If you like the video, please hit the like and subscribe button so you get all the notifications of when we're going to go live and when we post something.
Yeah, especially if you're not a Patreon member and you want to watch these shows, that's your easy way to get announced when we're going live. Again, we do it. We've been consistent here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like Jonesy said, but certainly
Sundays and
Thursdays.
Yeah, we used to do Tuesdays.
Not Tuesdays.
It depends. I mean, yeah, we've had to move around because they started adjusting the Disney Plus release schedule to now being Wednesdays instead of Fridays. So it's
Yep. Stick and move, man.
Thanks for everyone being so flexible with us.
Okay. All right. Any final word? I don't have the new credits updated, by the way. I apologize, but I will with everyone, the new 4 folks to Patreon. So I've got old credits here.
Well,
anything before we get out of here?
In the name of love, we should take our leave.
Look at that. What a master you are. You were able to work in YouTube. You got to put the glasses on. Do you have the glasses? Can you take us out with the glasses?
No,
no. Okay, never mind.
No, they're in the other room.
All right.
Well, you gotta leave them wanting more.
Okay. Well, again, from all of us here, including Bono, we'll see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.